I thought that the first thing we'd all want to talk to you about would be the Dracula role. I'll apologise straight away if you feel that you've talked about the Dracula role quite enough. And
I did notice in this programme it said here he cut his teeth on literally dozens of small parts.
That was, in fact, your establishing role.
Yes.
It's rather unkindly put in the books, but what, in fact, did it mean to you? I mean, looking back now, do you think it was the pivotal role for you?
Yes, insofar as making me internationally known, of course, it undoubtedly started the ball rolling. It was the first major role of any great importance, of any great impact that I ever had. It really did transform my life as an actor. Up to then, I had spent about 10 or 11 years doing lots of other things and not really getting very far. And then suddenly, I was offered by Hammer, the first Frankenstein picture, in fact, the only one I ever did, The Curse of Frankenstein, which I think I'm right in saying was 57. And that, I suppose, started this particular area. And then somebody said, pure coincidence, I suppose, well, look, we've been very successful with this one. Let's try the other great Gothic classic. So somebody said, fine, in that case we'll do Dracula. Or we might as well use the same man. I think this was the way the whole thing started. Of course, I'd read the book as a boy, and like everybody else, shivered when reading it for the first time. It's always been a slight source of disappointment to me that this character, as far as I'm personally concerned, with one exception, which we could possibly talk about later, has never really been portrayed on the screen the way the author described him, and I think probably all of you in this audience are aware of that. Physically, that's to say. But it was this character to which I owed a completely new career.
Were you happy to make a career out of him? Were you happy to return to him for one film after the next?
Well, I've made 5, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Over a period of about 12 years, 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really very many when you come to think of it. Of course, one doesn't want to be associated all the time with one specific character, one specific part. But if you make your mark in it, it's understandable that people should associate you with it. The important thing from my point of view is that I will always, I hope, appear in this area, in this kind of film. But obviously, nobody wants to go on playing the same part. Obviously, a time is reached when you feel, and maybe the audience does too, that there's very little more that you can do with it.
Isn't there a risk in the most recent performances that you're simply invited to be there
Yes.
without really having much to do?
Yes, to be honest, I think there is. But this, I suppose, is a question of demand. If the world, if I may say it in that way, and I suppose this is a matter more for the makers of the picture than for me, the world wants to go on seeing this type of picture with this particular character, well, who am I to refuse? You know.
This brings me to point as to how much you feel concerned about the, as it were, screen development of Dracula. Do you feel that the Count is being degraded in any way?
Not degraded, but I don't think that enough is being made out of him, to be quite honest. I've never really thought so. You see, those of you who've read the book, and there must be virtually everybody in this room probably, you're aware of the fact that, to begin with, he practically never stops talking. However, the whole conception of the character, as we did it in the Hammer pictures, well, that's fine. It's a way of presenting him. He is Count Dracula, etc., etc. But I think that the fact that he was not Stoker's physical description, to me, I was rather sorry about that. And then there were some marvellous opportunities, I thought, which perhaps were neglected for reasons I wouldn't know about. The famous scene when the man is shaving in the mirror and you see nothing behind him, the reflection. This, of course, was used in the Lugosi film, if you remember, in the lid of the cigarette box, which, incidentally, I saw for the first time in my life 2 weeks ago. I've never seen it. I've never seen anybody play the part, probably just as well.
Did you approve?
I would be inclined to copy.
What did you feel about the performance?
I thought it was extraordinary and very impressive in many ways, but naturally, it's very difficult to go back 20 or 30 years. You see, times change, and so do ways of doing things. Obviously, the way it was done in that particular time, it was decided to do it in, you might say, in the context of the age, of the period, of the time in which it was filmed. So the approach was very different. It was much more stylized. The movements, as you notice, were very sort of, very little. And he didn't really change very much. I've always tried to go from the stillness to the action and then back again to the stillness. purely a personal attitude, except, of course, again, in Stoker's book, he is described, as you know, as being the very devil incarnate. He leaps into action like an animal, like a tiger. He says, back, this man belongs to me, and so on, and he spins the girls to one side. He's obviously a very violent person. Now, I think there were many things that, when we made the first Dracula, could have been put in, but this was probably a matter of time and money. It always is, naturally. I felt that particular thing with the reflection was a pity that wasn't used. I felt it was a pity the summoning of the wolves as to the children of the night, you know, and so on. All these things weren't used.
But another essential thing, which I think that you added to what Bela Lugosi had done with the role, was quite simply glamour. Isn't this true? In a way that
rather a glamorous character, let's face it.
He is.
Very impressive character.
But
written as a glamorous character.
But if one can cut the glamour up, he's glamorous in the book in a different way from the glamour on the screen.
Of course, as you know, he's an old man when the story starts, and he gets progressively younger as he becomes progressively healthier, perhaps. And I did do this, as a matter of fact, in Spain in a picture about 18 months or 2 years ago. And I did portray, as near as we're ever likely to get, I think, at the moment, Stoker's character. I did appear as an old man with white hair and a white moustache, and I gradually got younger and younger and younger during the story. And I did use as many of the lines that he wrote as I could, without it going on and on, because, as you know, when he greets Jonathan Harker at the beginning, he spends about 2 or 3 pages saying, we are the Szeked Magyars. He tells the story of his family and his background, and he's talking about this Dracula. This was a Dracula indeed of 300 and 400 years ago, obviously himself, as you realize. Now, I did do this. The film, to my knowledge, has not been seen in this country. I don't know whether it will be. I believe it's been shown in Germany, and I believe that people reacted very favorably to it. But we must stick to the Hammer presentation, because this is the one that everybody's familiar with. I obviously had to put my own ideas into the part, but they were mainly concerned with the nobility of the man, the austerity of the man, that he was a demon, if you can portray such a thing today, that he was believable, acceptable, human, although ab-human in the literal sense in the story. I think he must be acceptable. He must be a man of great nobility, a man of great ferocity, and a man of great stillness, and a man, obviously, of course, is completely irresistible. Irresistible to women, presumably, and as far as men are concerned, unstoppable.
Yes.
You know. And that's what I tried to put into it, and of course it appears to have been successful.
Do you find now that you're able to say Dracula will do this when being asked to play him?
Well, I always hope I'll be able to say that.
But or are you being...
There's always a chance that the director will say, no, he won't.
This is the point. Because it struck me on this one that the audience has just seen, Dracula's Risen from the Grave, that if one is really purist about what vampires can and cannot do, the business of being able to rise with a stake through his heart is...
of course, well, that's quite wrong. There's no question about it. I mean, everybody knows, I'm not going to say from personal experience, but everybody probably knows that in vampire lore, there are many ways of destroying him. Somebody sent me a list 2 pages long the other day, and it's quite incredible. And in some cases unfilmable. But basically, of course, it's the stake through the heart and the head cut off. At least that's in the book, the head cut off. Basically, the stake through the heart. Well, I thought this. I must be fair in defense of myself there. I thought this, and I said, I don't think this is right. You know, you'll destroy the legend, or whatever you like to call it. And it doesn't seem right to me that he pulls it out. Incidentally, I got soaked. But that's...
what, with mock blood?
With red blood, yes, all over. It was red from head to foot when I climbed out of this coffin. But... of course, obviously, that, when I say that, makes you realize you must never show him climbing out of a coffin or getting in, because there's always the danger area here, you see. This can become slightly ludicrous, as you realize. And I noticed that when Lugosi did it, he sort of raised his head up, and he was standing beside it as they came onto him. Well, we do the same thing. It's obvious you hear the bang of the coffin lid, and then he's there.
Yeah.
But this business of the stake, I thought it was wrong, and yet, on the other hand, maybe I was wrong, because the whole point of that particular episode, if that was the one you've just shown, I didn't see, and I haven't seen the film, was that it didn't work on him because the boy couldn't pray. The renegade priest couldn't pray because he was a renegade. The boy couldn't pray because he was an atheist and didn't believe in prayer. And therefore, it didn't work. I think this was really behind it all. I think this was the reason. Now, whether you all got that, I wouldn't know. I just thought it doesn't look right. And yet, I've had letters from people from all over the world, and probably some of you here think that it was immensely effective. So maybe we shall have to think of new methods.
You, in fact, since you became involved with Dracula, you've learnt quite a lot about him. As
Oh yes, you mean the real one?
Yes, yes.
Oh Lord,
Can you
yes.
tell us something about that?
I don't know how much of you here know about the fact that there really was a Dracula. Do any of you know this? None of you? Yes, I thought somebody would say yes. Because anybody who really has, taken a great interest in this particular character, either on the screen or in books or in history, would know that there really was a Dracula. And I'm sorry I'm not making this up. I've got various letters and documents which have been sent to me, which I certainly could produce if asked, from archives and museums and various places in Budapest. Incidentally, Transylvania is mainly Romania, not Hungary, although I believe it's both, or was both at one time, and from Vienna. And there have been long, learned lectures given on the origin of the word, the origin of the name, and also the man himself. At the end of the 15th century, a man lived. He was called the Voyevod, which in Russian even today means the leader, or prince. Well, not prince, but leader and chieftain. The Voyevod Vladimir, or Vlad, V-L-A-D. I think it was the 5th, I'm right in saying. Vlad the 5th. And he was the prince of a state of Wallachia, W-A-L-L-A-C-H-I-A, which I think was part of medieval Romania. He died at the end of the 15th century, but during the time that he was alive, he was one of those rare things, a real monster. He was a real tyrant. He was a brilliant general. Obviously here again is the similarity in the Stoker story, when he describes him as being a leader of men. He was a prince. He was a ruler of a state. He had complete and absolute autonomy, did exactly what he liked. He was a bloodthirsty monster. There's no question about it. He was a genuine sadist. He was a frightening, ferocious, and terrifying man. His own people were terrified of him, and so frightened were they of him that they naturally said, he is the devil. He is in league with the devil. He has sold his soul to the devil. Naturally, people of that time, superstitious people, with a man behaving like this, would think it. He was also a very great soldier, and he fought against the Turks, who at that time were invading Eastern Europe, and he beat them at many battles. And because of his tremendous savagery against the Turks, and for obvious reasons, without having to go into details, he was called Vlad the Impaler. He is credited historically, and this apparently is true, with having impaled 10,000 Turks whom he beat in the battle. When the Turkish envoys came to sue for peace, he sent them back with their turbans nailed to their heads. This is the kind of man he was. Now, his name was Vlad, or Vladimir. However, he did belong to the Order of the Dragon, and that was Dracul, the name for dragon. So he was Dracul-A, which apparently means of. The suffix A is of, the dragon. So you might say he was Prince Vladimir, well, KG, or whatever you like to call it, or GCB or something, but it was Dracula. That was his chivalric title, if that's the word. Mm-hmm. Also, the word for demon, devil, was Dracul. Well, it's obvious there, isn't it? Because of the way people felt about him and the terror he inspired, I think you have a sort of double-edged sword here. You have a man who was really called Dracula by right, because he was a member of an order, and he was called the devil, the demon. This is the origin, beyond any doubt, of the name Dracula. I do not think that Stoker made it up. I have naturally never met Bram Stoker because he died a long time ago. At least, I assure you, I haven't met Bram Stoker. And on the other hand, I did meet his granddaughter, and I did meet his great-grandson, because they came to the filming of the first picture. And she was very pleasant and very charming and very informative. You'll probably also know Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker was an Irishman, Abraham Stoker. He lived at Clontarf, outside Dublin. And he was 6'4", red-bearded, and he was Henry Irving's manager for many years. He even wrote a book about him. And when Dracula came out, and everybody, of course, in those days had a delicious shudder, like Lewis Carroll, you know, Queen Victoria asking for his first book, which was on the differential calculus, I believe, when Alice in Wonderland came out. When Dracula came out, everybody said, we must get this man's first book. Well, it duly arrived, and it was called The Duties of the Clerks to the Petty Sessions of the Irish Courts. And that was what he was. He was a lawyer or a barrister or something in that area. I think I'm right here, am I not? Because I think you know about Stoker. Anyway, he obviously didn't invent the name. He must have found it somewhere. There is the story that he dreamt up, the book, the story of Dracula, the vampire, after having had a very hefty lobster dinner. This again makes good copy, but who knows? It's equally well known that Mary Shelley wrote the Frankenstein story as part of a bet with Byron, her husband, the poet Shelley, and Dr. Polidori, and they all produced a story, and she won the match. They said, yours is the best, and this is true. It was written in a house on the shores of Lake Geneva, not very far from where I lived. Now, this is the origin of the word, Dracula, probably with a K or a C. There is a castle to this day in Romania. I forget the exact spot. This was Vlad V's castle. So there is a castle Dracula, and there was a Dracula.
When the Hammer films were being put together, what was the basis for the architecture that was chosen for them? Was it simply straight out of fantasy?
What, you mean the Gothic appearance of the castle? Well, I think sort of just Gothic fantasy, you know. I don't think it was meant to be any particular period. And it was very well done, you know, because we did it on the lot, which, for those of you who don't know, it means the outside of the studio, within the grounds of the studio. And we only built it up to about the height of that screen. That was the ground floor, so to speak. And the rest was painted in on the screen, on glass. There's now the one that we did where I think I went over the edge and ended up impaled on a cross. I forget which one that was. That's the same one. That's Dracula's Risen from the Grave. Oh, that's right, that one, yes. Well, that, again, they built the front door, and the rest, of course, was the studio. It was like this wall. Then it was put in. I would like to tell you a story, if I may, about that film, because to me it's the funniest thing I've ever heard while making a picture. Those of you who've seen the film will remember that at the end of it I ended up impaled on this rather large cross, actually. It was very uncomfortable. And to walk about with it out here. Anyway, I must tell a story which is really true. I hope I'm not going to upset anybody, but it really was true. When Hammer Films received the Queen's Award for Export, which I dare say some of you know about, for having brought very large sums of money into this country and considerably helped the economy, which they did, there's no question about it, in all parts of them. The award was given to us during the filming of this picture down at Pinewood. All of us were there, you know, all the Hammer people, the great team, like Jack Asher, the cameraman, and Bernie Robinson, the art director, who is alas dead, and Tony Nelson Keyes, producer of many of them, Terence Fisher, of course, naturally. All the men who had really done the job, the people who were responsible for Hammer's success. Anyway, we were all there, and the award was duly presented, which is a sort of plastic block with these crust, whatever they are, cogs in the middle and so on. And the Lord Lieutenant, I think of Buckinghamshire, a very charming man, came down and presented this award, read a speech. Of course, naturally, James Carreras was there, Sir James Carreras. And after this, there was a lunch, and the Lord Lieutenant and his wife attended the lunch, and then after that, they came on set. And they came on at a rather violent moment when I was crashing about in the rocks with this cross through me, pouring blood, and with these awful things in my eyes, which I'm almost totally blinded, and looking really rather unattractive, and making the most hideous noises. I am making them for more reason than one, because I just before that slipped a disc. Not the easiest thing in the world. Well, after the Lord Lieutenant and his wife, I'm sure had never been in a film studio in their lives, had been watching all this, without any expression at all on their faces, I didn't dare look in their direction. There was a long, long silence, and then very clearly and very penetratingly, he turned to his wife and he said, "You know, my dear, that man is a member of my club." I really think it's a wonderful remark. Marvellous. We have a lot of fun on these films, you know. A lot. Except when somebody says take one, then of course, naturally, we do it as well as we can. But we have a lot of laughs.
Can we just talk about the Christopher Lee Club, as it were, for a moment?
Yeah.
In fact, your family ancestry is quite notable, isn't it? Is it? I read
There's
somewhere
been some rather strange people, yes.
Weren't you way back when involved with the Borgias in some way?
Well, they were married to them. I suppose you could say that was involved.
Some involvement.
This is one of these strange historical coincidences. Everybody thinks so. Well, of course, you know. But in actual fact, it was merely a marriage involvement, and it was not at the time of Cesare Borgia and Pope Alexander VI. It was a little bit later. It wasn't at the time of the famous Borgias, who incidentally are Spaniards. Anyway, came from Aragon. It was after the period of Alexander VI and Cesare and Lucrezia. But this, the family name, my family, Carandini family, were married at one time to some of the Borgia family, I believe. So I was told.
But in fact,
they have rather an extraordinary history. One of them is buried in the Pantheon, next to Raphael. Can't do better than that. I don't think I can do that somehow. And then they won't believe anyway.
But you're in fact a Londoner, aren't you?
Yes, I was born in London. Born, christened, married, and lived within a mile. All the same place. But I'm partly Italian.
You worked in the city at one stage. I'm curious
Yes,
to know
I did.
in what way.
Yes, as an office boy. I did that in 1938. I worked in Leadenhall Street as an office boy. I made the tea and did the petty cash and carried the typewriters around.
And
very good training for one's patience. And I did that. I was paid £1 a week. I lived on it too. And then I was attached to the Rhodesian police for a short time, and then went into the Air Force in '39.
Now you're telling me that during the war, you, in fact, you were involved in the special branch, weren't you? Special intelligence.
Not special branch, no, a thing called SOE, but that stands for Special Operations Executive, but I can't discuss that.
But during the period immediately after the war, you were apparently involved in things which were really quite top secret.
Yes, I think a lot of people were, and obviously again one is bound by the Official Secrets Act to this day. I was involved at one time in what I suppose you could call war crimes investigation, which meant that during a period of a year to a year and a half, I and other people had to go to various places and see various people, take various people, deal with various people. I really can't be more specific than that.
But
well, I promise you I didn't pull the lever.
But it's always struck me as curious that after this kind of experience, you should then have moved into the film industry, which must have seemed
to you. Do you think so? I think it's a great parallel.
It must have seemed to you a rather more superficial way, let's say, of employment.
Let's face it, obviously peacetime may seem superficial in relationship to war. I mean, that must be obvious, because a war is an unnatural and abnormal time for anybody during which you do things that normally you wouldn't think of doing, and certainly wouldn't want to do. Superficial, I don't think that's really the word. I know what you mean. You mean they don't have the same importance? No, of course they don't. War is for your very existence. On the other hand, let's face it, being an actor is also for your very existence. I can assure you it's not the job some people think it is. There are, I think, 16 or 18,000 members of Equity, men and women, who are performers. And at the moment, the percentage employed is about 10 or 12 in films. Now, that shows you the uncertainties of the acting profession, particularly today. But anyway, we didn't come here to discuss that.
Your earliest roles, have you any particular affectionate memories of them, or were they just...
Well, I can remember all of them. All of them. The first one, I think I said about 8 words. Well, it was in Paris. And I had to borrow the director's dinner jacket. That was in Corridor of Mirrors, Eric Portman. I have many memories of, well, as I said, I think I can remember virtually every picture I've ever done.
The record says that you did a lot of stunting during that time.
Yes, I did. Not like falling off the mast of a ship or anything like that. I mean, this is a specialist stunt thing, but when it came to doing fights or jumps off horses or being in crash cars and things like that, I frequently did it. I did a picture called They Were Not Divided, which was about the Guards' Armoured Division, in which I'm barely recognizable. I was one of the tank commanders. And some very unpleasant things happened in that. We had to simulate the destruction of a tank. Of course, naturally, I was in it. And I had to duck down underneath in the turret, and put the wires together to set off the charge, which was on the front of the tank, which some German technicians had put on the front of the tank. And whether it was coincidence or not, I think they put on a rather unusually heavy charge. And the front of the tank was covered with camouflage branches and things, which is correct, of course. And a lot of stuff called gel, which is petroleum jelly, which is inflammable. Well, anyway, as we were charging across this plain, which was in Germany, a place called Gemünd Eifel near Cologne, I duly, on the word action or whenever the cue was, ducked down, put the wires together, and the explosion was unbelievable. I was really half knocked out, and we were going at the time through a ruined bombed village, which was the genuine article. It wasn't a film set, and it was a very dangerous place because you weren't allowed to walk off the road. It was full of mines and booby traps still. Well, the result, which is on the film, I may tell you, and as far as I know, the tank is still there. The result was that the explosion blew the trunnions of the tank turret off, and the whole thing swung round, and the gun spun into the wall of the nearest house. And, well, have you ever had a building fall on you? But this did, on top of me, so I was up to here in bricks in the turret, and half dazed and more blood than I can assure you I had in later pictures. And the driver of the tank, who was a sergeant in the army, who was the genuine article, gave a piercing yell and bailed out, which I don't blame him at all. Tank caught fire. I couldn't get out, and it was going down the road, and one tread went up the cutting like that, and the other went, and it went like that. A Sherman tank. And I just got out, as you may see, and and the director said, "What'd you jump for?"
Never satisfied, are they?
I don't think he really meant it quite that way, but yes, I used to do a lot of those things, and I've got the breaks to show it.
You were set on fire at one stage, weren't you, in a film?
I have been, yes, once deliberately and once by mistake. And of course, I still have that finger.
Can we just pause there, and we'll have a look at a couple of extracts. One from the event that gave you that hazard, and the other from Corridors of Blood. We'll run them round the wrong way because the Dark Avenger is really rather a splendid extract, although it's the earlier film.
Can I say something about that to explain it before they show it?
The Dark Avenger, which you made in 1955.
That's right. I didn't really have a part of any consequence. I think that was only used because I could use a sword. And I had a lot of experience of using swords, fencing and things like that.
You were quite a swordsman off-screen, weren't you?
Well, yes, and my father was army champion for many years. And it's in the blood, if I may call it. And anyway, I was used for this. And I did the fight, which, of course, on the screen, when you see it, it'll be cut up. I think it's some sort of a record. We did a fight. The swords were this big, and they were real. About that long, double-handers, these sort of things. We had to use them in one hand. And Errol, of course, I think I'm right in saying, had gloves on. I didn't. And they asked me to do the whole thing with his stunt double, a man called Raymond Paul, who was on the British Olympic team, and I think still is one of the best fencers in this country. And he and I did the whole fight in one take, without a cut, and it took 4¼ minutes. Now you think of how long that is when you run around trying to kill each other, diving up and down the stairs and falling into the fire and having chickens thrown in your face and stools and things like that. And, well, it was 4¼ minutes, but when we came to do the first close shot of Errol, I'm afraid he wasn't quite as accurate as Raymond Paul, and well, that was the result.
Okay, well, we'll start with a little piece from Corridors of Blood and then go on to this sword fight sequence from The Dark Avenger.
Well, that's very sad to watch that first film, as far as I'm concerned. I'd never seen the film. But you saw there one of the greatest human beings who ever lived, in my opinion. A wonderful, wonderful man. And I really mean this. It's not a question of just casually saying it was a privilege to know him. This was just about the greatest human being I've ever met in my life. A marvellous actor and a marvellous man, and we are very much the poorer without him. I've never met anybody like Boris Karloff. I don't think anybody has, really. And anybody who's ever worked with him will tell you that. Anybody who's ever known him, or even said, how do you do? Tremendous courage. You know, when I made, I think it was his last film with him, you can imagine what a thrill, of course, it was for me to do that. That was not the first time I'd ever worked with him. That was in a television series. It was the first time I'd done a film with him, and for me, I was just, well, hero worshipping the whole time. Every scene, every time he spoke or opened his mouth. And, you know, it was something in my life, it's rather difficult to notice, to find the right phrase for it. Occasionally things happen in one's lives, and one says, that was it, or that was a wonderful moment, that was a marvellous experience, and you treasure them. Well, that's how I felt about Boris. I treasure every moment that I ever spent with him. And not because of an actor admiring another actor, it went much deeper than that. I know, obviously, how very, very difficult these parts are to play, because you are trying to make the unbelievable believable. And he was a master at it. Of course, with a face like that, you know, it's one of the great faces of the cinema. But he was such a gentle soul, he was so kind, he was so thoughtful, he was so helpful, he had the most marvellous sense of humour. He was a very, very funny man. But the last picture he ever made, and certainly in this country, was called The Crimson Altar, and I was in it. And I did it just to be with him and to make a picture with him, because he was in his 81st year. And the courage of this man, you know, it was almost superhuman. He couldn't walk, barely at all. His left leg, which had been progressively crippled over the years, was in a brace, and he could hardly breathe. He died eventually of emphysema, I believe, which is progressive deterioration of the lungs. And yet, that man, when somebody said action, he became alive. He just blazed. There's no other word for it. He was an Englishman, as you probably know, many of you. His name was William Henry Pratt. He was born in Dulwich. He was educated at Uppingham. He was English as they come, absolutely to the backbone. His great love in life was cricket. And it was one of mine, it still is, and one of my friends has never forgotten coming to Lord's and sitting between us. He's never really quite got over it. It seemed like something out of a public relations man's dream. But I've never seen that film. I do remember, directed by Bob Day, a very good director indeed, and I remember the photography was marvellous. It looked very sort of Hogarthian. It captured the period of that time. I played a character called Resurrection Joe, who was resurrectionist, which of course they were known as, the men who took the bodies from the graves. Boris was playing a good man. He was playing a man who wanted to show that it was cruel and brutal to operate on people without anesthetics. And he was playing a sort of a Lister, Dr. Lister, you know, invented anesthetics. So he was a good man all the way through, and of course, I, as you saw, my usual charming self. And anyway, working with him seriously was a marvellous experience for me, and I've never met anyone like him. He was a great man, great human being. He also lived next door to me, on the other side of the wall, literally, which I'm sure would make a good story one day. He was also born on the same day as my daughter. And I was born on the same day as Vincent Price. And Peter Cushing was born the day before.
Just how much of a team did you regard yourselves, in fact? Do the sort of the top horror men, if one can describe you as that, did you keep very closely in touch with each other?
Who, Boris and me?
Well,
you mean?
Boris
or Peter?
Cushing.
Yes, we do. We do. Every year I get a telegram from Vincent saying happy birthday to us. You know, every year. And Peter and I, of course, another very good man, very fine man, and a superb actor. We keep very closely in touch, yes. Well, I don't think it's a question of coincidence. Because we happen to have appeared in many films together, I think that you take to people or you don't. I think it was pure coincidence, if you like, that we happened to make the same kind of picture, made our names that way, perhaps.
You would not reach the stage where you would only be in a picture if somebody else was in it, or vice versa?
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, I don't believe in double acts, if you see what I mean. I think that you're an individual and you must make your mark as an individual. And as an actor, the obviously important thing is to try and make your mark on your time. And if, when you've gone, not if, people will say, oh yes, I remember him. He did this, he did that. Well, this is really what it's all about, isn't it?
You mentioned Robert Day. In fact, you've worked with quite a number of quite intriguing directors.
Oh,
John
yes.
Huston, for example.
John
comes to
Huston,
mind.
yes, in Moulin Rouge. That was an interesting experience. I only had one real scene in it, and that was shot in the Café de Magot, which still, of course, exists in Saint-Germain, in Paris. And they shot it in the actual area. And they did it in August, if I remember rightly, or no, it was July in Paris, when the temperature was in the 90s, and we had all the French traffic going past that close. I couldn't hear a word that José Ferrer was saying. He couldn't hear a word I was saying. And he was coming in bent double with his knees, bent so that he would look very small. And John Huston just said to us, well, have a good time, kids, and went away, and on the other side of the road, reading Time magazine. Well, this was my introduction to the name that I had heard so much about. He was a marvellous person to work with, very sympathetic, very understanding, great filmmaker, of course. I never got over that first rehearsal with him sitting over there reading Time magazine and the traffic going along in between, and all the tourists click, 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 and all the gendarmes shouting at everybody and blowing whistles. It was quite an experience. If you can remember anything under those circumstances, it's something.
You also worked with Wells, I think.
Yes, Orson Welles. Well, we all know Orson Welles, probably the greatest overall talent cinema's ever had. I did a television version of Moby Dick with Orson Welles. I have no idea what happened to it. We did it some years ago, and Patrick McGowan played the first mate, Captain Starbuck. I played the second mate, Mr. Flask. Joan Plowright, I beg your pardon, played the cabin boy. Kenneth Williams played about 6 parts. Or so it seemed. He really did play at least 3. And who else was in it? I can't remember offhand, but I do remember that Orson Welles directed everything, and he didn't play in the sequences we did. That was all separate cut on him, which I believe he did in Rome or something. It was rather confusing. And it was the story of Moby Dick done as a company of actors who walk on the stage one day and they say, well, now what are we going to do today? So you're dressed in your ordinary clothes, so to speak, or this was the Victorian period. And they said, well, today's Moby Dick, scene 2 or whatever, so on you go. And this is all on the screen. And it was a bare, empty stage. We shot it in the Hackney Empire. We followed on Sid Millward and his nitwits, I remember that. And we shot it in the Scala Theatre. Also, I think the Hackney Empire is now done. I think the Scala's coming down. And it was fascinating. He tilted the camera and spun it around, which made the whole stage do this, and we all staggered over in that direction. It looked as if the ship, because the stage was meant to be the ship, had, tilted in a storm, and there was a big ladder alongside, which was supposedly the rail, and everybody was doing this, which is the harpoons. Nothing, all mime, and occasional lines. And I remember distinctly that the first time that anybody turned to me in the story was, we are going ashore now, mateys. And then looking at me for some reason, I don't know why, said, but don't forget, Mr. Flaus, for God's sake, no fornication. I really don't know why. It may be in Melville's book, I don't know. But I looked a bit hurt at that, I think. And, but no, he was of course, he's a great talent. Citizen Kane, I suppose, if you can say such a thing, is probably the greatest film ever made. And I've worked with him, I've worked with Bergman, believe it or not, but in a very minor way, and in theatre and television before he made these films. I've worked with a lot of directors. Raoul Walsh, One Eye, in his day a very famous leading man. He's still alive, he must be 80, at least. In Captain Hornblower, that was another sword fight. That time I got it through the arm with Gregory Peck. And I remember Raoul Walsh was a very tough character indeed. He was a remarkable man. There was some marvellous scenes in that film. And a lot of people, Stanley Baker played one of the bosuns, and every stuntman in the world was in it practically, and of course Peck and Virginia Mayer was the leading lady. And after she delivered her first line, and this may sound awful, but it is true, Raoul Walsh said, Lady Macbeth will now go below. He was an amazing man, he was a great leading man in his young days. He like Douglas Fairbanks, only he I think he lost an eye in a car. A stone spun up and hit him in the eye, and he lost his eye. And then he became a director. And he was a very tough hombre, very tough indeed. But in those days, I can assure you, when you were asked to do things, you just did them. You didn't say, oh, no, and call for the double. You did them. Stars, of course, had to be protected from insurance, but the disposable ones like myself who were trying to get somewhere, I mean, we just did everything we were asked. Chandeliers would fall on our heads without word of warning, all sorts of things. I was savaged by a mechanical crocodile in the pool at MGM. In beyond Mombasa, I had to pitch down a mine in Kenya, an open cast quartz mine, and I was ripped from here to here, wide open. And George Marshall, who was a great character, was still directing. He must be the oldest director in the world, and he certainly has directed more films, I should think, than anyone in the world. Came out to me after the first take, quite unperturbed. The producer, on the other hand, was ashen, because we were only halfway through the film. And George came up to me and said, you forgot to do that when the thing hit you. It's quite true, I had. So we had to do it again. But you were talking about great directors. I did have this marvelous experience 18 months ago. And that is the high spot of my career, and probably will be for many years. I was fortunate enough to make a picture, and this time it was a role of consequence with Billy Wilder. And that, for me, was it, absolutely. I've never met anybody like this man. One of the nicest men I've ever met, and he had a very frightening reputation. Totally unfounded, I may say. But for being a man who could destroy you with a word, well, I dare say a lot of people could if they wanted to. I dare say almost anybody in this room could do it if they chose to. I found him absolutely fascinating. There's no other word. A wonderfully human, kind person, a marvelous person to work with, and, of course, quite brilliant. This relentless, unstoppable genius, there's no other word for it. You know, it just went on and on and on. He never went more than 3 or 4 feet from the camera. He never sat down. Never. Just extraordinary. I'd never met, even in all the years that I've been making pictures and all the people I've worked with, I've never met anyone like Wilder. Never. This is one of the great men of the cinema. I don't have to tell anybody here. I mean, you all know it.
Was it a matter of his being extremely positive about where he wanted you to stand?
Oh, absolutely. He'd say, look, rehearse the scene without telling you anything.
Yeah.
And you'd rehearse it, carefully keeping towards the camera, of course. And then he'd say, well, now, yes, here. And then, of course, all swept aside, you know, and then he would do it the way he'd always intended to do it. But to show you how he could keep an eye on people, Robert Stevens and I, who played brothers in the picture, I played the brains of the family, I must say, my own support there. Mycroft, the power behind the throne, which he has described, in fact, in Conan Doyle's book, although he is described as being very fat, which, or corpulent, I believe, which I haven't reached the point of being yet. We had this scene in the tent, and we hadn't been handed it. We hadn't been given it. And when we were shooting up at Loch Ness, there's a scene in the film where Queen Victoria arrives, and I introduce her to various people, and then we go into the tent. I'm sorry, before that, I have this row in the tent with my brother. And it's quite a considerable scene. It was about 6, 7, 8 pages. And we hadn't had it, and we kept on thinking about this, and we kept on saying, when's the tent, you know, when's the dialogue for the tent coming, and so on. And we were up at this ruin, Urquhart Castle, which is on the southern shore of Loch Ness, where we were shooting the sequences, and we were already concerned with one particular scene, and I had to introduce all these men, all fictitious names, W.W. Prescott, inventor of the revolving periscope or something, you know. No, co-inventor. If I'd said inventor, it would have been cut, you know, you left out the co, and quite rightly, after all, lines are there to be said correctly. And during this scene, of this introduction, suddenly, after we'd finished it was still daylight, Robert Stevens and I were handed the famous scene in the tent. And we thought, aha, now we're all right, you see. And so we crept away a good 30 or 40 yards, and we thought we hid ourselves round a corner, and we opened these pages, you know, this gold that we'd been waiting for, which we were frantic about, actually, because it was a lot of dialogue. And we'd been told we were going to do it up there. As it happens, we did it in the studio at Pinewood several weeks later. But we thought we must get this. And we hadn't opened the first pages before a voice, literally from the skies, from nowhere, simply said, don't rehearse the scene in the tent, boys. And from 100 yards away, this man had spotted what we were doing, and while he was in the middle of setting up the scene and directing the picture, he'd spotted it, and no, they mustn't do it until I'm ready. Of course, he's right, in a way. He's right.
Did the scene live up to it when you came to it?
Well, yeah, it was, yes, it was a good scene. It was a very successful scene, I'm told.
Well, I meant...
The two brothers being thoroughly unpleasant to each other, having a row.
It's said of Wilder, I think it's true, that he and his scriptwriter work absolutely...
Oh, I.L. Diamond.
Yes.
Yes, they do. And he in every scene, and this must be very exhausting, every take, every rehearsal of every scene, he's there with a script. He never takes his eyes off it. Never. That, God knows, 8 months. Every single scene, every single shot, including all the rehearsals. And at the end of the take, it's words all right, all the words all right. After all, they spent 2.5 years writing it. And if one word is wrong, go again. I think myself, although this is unnerving, to be quite honest, I think it is probably, for an actor or an actress, a very good thing, because you are so determined that you are going to measure up to this standard that you really lift yourself, I perhaps could say, to a pitch above which you think you're capable. So the performance comes out. You know, with a man like that, or with any good director, that if he says print it, well, you don't worry. You do worry, but you shouldn't, if you know what I mean.
It's interesting because the implication of this is that the best director is one who allows no, spontaneity, no invention in the part.
No improvisation is the word I think you're looking for. Well, this is a question of style, isn't it? And today, people seem to talk a great deal about improvisation.
How much freedom, do you get normally in a scene? Do you?
Let me put it this way. The words are there, so you say the words, don't you? And, you can't suddenly start improvising Shakespeare for the sake of argument. You have to say the right words. Any actor or actress should. Obviously, if it's contemporary dialogue and the words aren't absolutely paramount apart from the operative phrases and plot phrases, you can perhaps move it around a bit, and there might be a director who would say to you, well, look, do it your way, so to speak. And if you say, well, it's more natural for me to say, well, before you pick up the ashtray or whatever, if it doesn't look ridiculous, they'll let you do it. But I'm a great believer in discipline, you see. An actor must be disciplined. I did a picture with an actress once who was supposed to have hysterics, and I was supposed to bring her out of it as the doctor. And she did have hysterics, and she was unable to stop. After the director said cut, she was still rocketing round the set. You never heard such a noise, and tears and everything cascading all over the floor. And, this is all very well, but that is not acting. Not really. Otherwise, we wouldn't have many friends, you know. If people say to you, well, when you act hysteria, be hysterical, or when you murder somebody, well, kill them, you know. You carry it to this conclusion, it becomes absurd. You obviously have to have discipline and be controlled, so the computer is working, like when you go wrong in a line, and you turn it round and you get it out at the end, and somebody says, well, I didn't notice. The computer's working. It's experience. It's years of experience and dramatic equipment, I suppose. Now, improvisation to me is not discipline. It's impossible for an actor or an actress or a group of people, particularly on the stage where you are completely dependent on cues. Obviously, you can't do it on the stage. I wouldn't have thought. But even in films, when the same thing applies. If you have to say to me, good morning, how are you? And my answer is supposed to be, thank you very much, I'm very well. And I suddenly say, what's the price of butter? Because I happen to feel like that, that's improvising a scene. I think this is murder for other actors and actresses. On the other hand, some directors believe in it. I know this, and I know of specific cases where it's happened, where people sat around and the director said, okay, now, you show me. I like to be told, we all do, you have to be guided. Obviously, you know a certain amount, or you hope you do, and certainly think so. But you must have that guidance. That's what the director's for, among other reasons.
You've never wanted to direct yourself? In both senses.
I have often been asked if I would, and, to consider it and so on. And I don't wish to sound what might appear to be falsely modest, but I really don't think I know enough. This may sound a little peculiar. I've done 100 and something films. What I mean by that is, obviously, I think I could direct artists, people like myself, actors and actresses. That I think I could do, because this is a human relationship. If I spent several weeks in the cutting room, if I talked and spent hours with a cameraman, and with the writers, and with the art directors, which I think you should do if you are going to be a director, because you really must be a partial master of everything. And then I think I could do it. Of course, I could direct a film, but that, for me, isn't enough, because unfortunately I'd be rather a perfectionist, which is disastrous And that's what I mean when I say I don't think I know enough. Not enough about everything. You know what I mean? And it's not enough just to say, well, now look, I want you to come from there and we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do this and we'll do that. You've got to know about lenses, you've got to know about lights, you've got to know about cutting, essentially cutting, probably more than anything else. So I think I know enough now that if I went into this in detail, I could end up as a director, but I'm not sure.
I asked because I understand you've recently formed a production company.
I've formed a production company, that's quite correct, but
we
will employ other directors to make the films for us.
Yes, I see.
And I will not necessarily even be in all of them, possibly to the relief of the director and the producer, but might be in some of them.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. I'm hoping to make pictures. It's not easy today. I have every intention of making them. We have some very good properties, very exciting stories. Oh, they will be in the area with which I'm most associated. I think it would be foolish not. I've always said this many times. People say to me, don't you feel typed, or don't you feel stuck, or wouldn't you like to do something else? Well, I do other things. And I'm very happy to, because an actor obviously wants to do as much as he thinks he can do, which anybody's prepared to offer him. But I'm never going to leave the area of the macabre, as I call it. I'll still be romping around the graveyard for some years, I hope.
Well, it's just...
I never leave it, because I would be foolish to do so. It's obviously a specialist thing, something in which people are accustomed to seeing me.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do. It's a great challenge. You'll feel you've overcome it if the challenge, pays off. And so these films will be in this particular field, in this particular area. Not necessarily absolute out-and-out horror pictures. They might be thrillers. They might be Cloak and Dagger or Cops and Robbers, but I would like to make my own. Obviously, I think we all would like to. I only hope it comes off. We're certainly going to be careful. We're not going to rush into it.
Let's just hold it there and have a look at another little clip from something that you made quite recently, which in fact shows you doing something a little bit out of the ordinary, although it's in a horror context.
The title does sell a film. There's no question about it. And in this day and age, you have to leave that kind of thing to the people whose business it is to know about it. And the distributors and the exhibitors and the people who market pictures are the experts. And so whatever you may think, and I mean, let's face it, it is a rather peculiar title, you can be wrong. You can say, oh no, it shouldn't be that, it should be something quite different. Of course it doesn't drip blood, but it's 4 stories by Robert Bloch, one of the great writers of this particular type of film.
Did you meet Bloch at all?
I know him very well. Known him for years. I've stayed in his home in America.
What sort of man is he?
A marvellous man. Tremendous sense of humour. You've got to have a sense of humour to write this kind of material, and certainly you need. I don't say you need a sense of humour, but it certainly helps to perform it. Because if you take a thing too seriously, you end up taking it and yourself too seriously, and you can bore people. The 2 things: if people get bored by what you're doing on the screen, you've failed, and if they laugh at the wrong time, you've also failed. You or the people who put it together, or whatever way it's been done. And I don't think that many people laugh at us. If they laugh with us, it's because we want them to. Now, there was a classic instance in The Curse of Frankenstein when I just dismembered somebody, I think it was, casually, with one hand. And this frightful scream this girl gave, and the next shot was Peter Cushing at breakfast saying, would you pass the marmalade? And it was just like that. Well, this is deliberate, of course. You must lighten the load from time to time, you must.
Well, let's see if they laugh at this one.
It's a very good story, then. As a matter of fact, it might interest you to know that the ending was changed. What she does with the doll. I don't know how many of you have seen it. I don't want to spoil it. But the original ending, she bit off its head. Because it was a sugar doll. And that was not allowed by the censor. And I'm glad.
That was really a very straight performance.
Oh, yes,
wasn't it?
yes.
And I think really people tend to forget that your career is not made up of just one horror performance after another. In fact,
well, no, I hope it never will be either. It's obviously the area in which one's best known, as I said before, and one must be grateful, obviously.
On the other hand, I know you're a great admirer of Lon Chaney's.
Well.
I wonder to what extent you want to emulate his facility with makeup and...
Well, the difference, the obvious difference, there are many differences between Lon Chaney and somebody like myself, or Boris, or Bela Lugosi, or my lass I never met, who was, I believe, a very sweet man. The difference between Chaney and the rest of us is that he did it all himself. He made his own makeups. Nobody did them for him. Put them all on himself. I'm sure a lot of you have seen some of his films, and I'm sure a lot of you also saw the James Cagney picture about him. And he did the most excruciating things to himself. In The Phantom of the Opera, he had to put wires up his nose and round his lips and teeth, and he was really in terrible pain. And when he did the Hunchback of Notre Dame, he really dislocated his limbs. He was able to do so. He could dislocate an arm and a leg, and he did it. He would throw it out and then keep it like that and strap it. He was the most extraordinary man, the son of deaf mutes, and very silent, quiet, withdrawn individual. He died at, I think, 47 or 48, having made a very large number of films, some of which I would dearly love to do again. I think Chaney was the master. When you said that, you said everything. I don't think there was anyone like him. He was by himself, completely, or rather up there, by himself. Makeups, of course, one has one's own say in the makeups to a certain extent, and sometimes one helps a bit, much as one can.
Is there any particular characteristic here you can remember as having suggested and adopted in the makeup?
Well, the first Frankenstein that I did, the only one, in fact, it was all done in rather a hurry, and they did try a couple of tests which really were rather unsuitable. And I said, well, look, you've got to make this man look very ugly, but he must be human, because he's supposed to be. So I looked pretty unattractive, some people said, rather like a road accident. And I thought this up, so to speak, as we went along. Phil Leakey and I did it together, and while listening to the Olympic Games, I remember, from Tokyo, 4:30 in the morning. And that was very uncomfortable. I couldn't wear that for very long, and nobody would eat with me.
What was?
And I had to eat everything through, I had to eat mashed potatoes and drink everything through a straw, because if I moved my face, everything came off.
What was?
That was very uncomfortable. It took about 4 hours to put on.
What was the most uncomfortable?
Oh, the most uncomfortable?
Had, yeah.
Oh, the Fu Manchu eyes, beyond any doubt.
Really?
Yes, 2.5 hours, just to get that effect, that's all. Because it's plastic, you see, and it's all round here and out to there, and completely rigid. And you mustn't look down or your own eyelids show, and you mustn't look up, all you see is the white of an eye. So you have to play the whole character like that, on a level. You have to think all the time that you mustn't look down and you mustn't look up. You can't do anything with it. And of course, having that on from 7 o'clock in the morning until sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10 at night is not pleasant. The Mummy was another very uncomfortable one, of course, very constricting. And also, I had a lot of accidents on that picture. I tore all the muscles in my neck and shoulders carrying these girls around. Let that be a warning to some of you. Carrying somebody like this out in front of you with rigid arms, when they can't put their arms around your neck, try it sometime. 87 paces, 3 times in one evening. And it was disastrous, ruined my golf. And I also had to burst through a door on one of those sequences, which somebody had thoughtfully left locked on the inside. And I also had to come through a window and smash through the window, which partly was sugar and partly wasn't. And that was a tough one. And the first Dracula was a bit of a tough one too, because I don't know how one does these things. I guess people will explain it. They say when it's all going, you do things that normally you couldn't begin to do. But in the first Dracula, I remember I had to go and pick a girl up off the ground and fling her into an open grave. And I rushed across this area, and I bent down and lifted her up just like that. I couldn't possibly do that, not normally. And I staggered across with her and flung her into this grave with a tremendous yell and fell straight on top of her. Which I believe is still on film somewhere. Well, we have a lot of things of this kind, I mean, obviously one has accidents. Things can be very uncomfortable, things can be very difficult. The Dracula part is a difficult part to play because it's always within, as you said earlier, the same area. You're always asked to do the same thing and to be the same thing, to do this and to do that. And I would like to vary the mixture a bit more. That sounds awful, doesn't it?
That sounds quite understandable.
Well, yes. And I think the vein may be played out. You could go on like this for hours, couldn't you? I don't know the answer to this. It's just the way it's written. I'm probably going to do another one at the end of this year. And I believe the idea is to bring him back into today's day and age. It should be very interesting, provided we don't have him in hot pants or anything like that.
You've just been working on a Western, haven't you?
Yes, I've done my first Western, something I've wanted to do all my life. It was a marvellous experience. Marvellous experience. It's a new world, absolutely. all of us have seen westerns. I love them. I think they're probably, in a way, film in its most perfect form. You have absolutely everything in very clearly defined terms. I did my first one. I was very lucky. I worked with one of the top western directors in the world, Bert Kennedy, who did The War Wagon and Dirty Dingus McGee and Support Your Local Sheriff, Support Your Local Gunman. And I worked in this film with him as director, and Raquel Welch and Robert Culp. And I had a couple of scenes with both of them. I played an English gunsmith, perfectly straight character. I actually had a beard, which this is the remnant of the beard. And it was fabulous. It really was marvelous. I loved every minute of it. Of course, it's a very difficult thing. You have to learn how to use these guns. I was using a Winchester, the famous Winchester, either the 73 or the other one. And they're very difficult to use, when you're doing this all the time, try and keep the gun steady. To fire a gun properly is terribly difficult because you have to cock it before you pull the trigger. And you have to draw it with 3 fingers, cock it as you draw it, point it and then pull the trigger, because it's not a normal, just, hammer going backwards and forwards. Every time you fire a shot, you have to pull the hammer back. Of course, you see this business, pulling it on the trigger and fanning a gun. You never hit a wall with that, but of course you make a lot of noise, and you frighten the people maybe. But in the old days, they used to shoot them from this distance, or in the back preferably, and clouds of black gunpowder smoke, and you couldn't even see where you were trying to, shoot next time. But this was with some Spanish stuntmen who were fabulous, the Riders, the Bandits. They were supposed to be Mexican bandits. We did the film in Spain. I loved it. It was a new world to me, and I suddenly realized that these people really do walk like that, or did. They really did walk with their hands like this, because they were waiting for somebody to throw down on them. And when they walked into a town, they really were sort of walking and looking from side to side in case there was somebody with a gun. When they did speak, they spoke very slowly. They took their time. They had to. Their lives depended on it, on the right answer. Do you know so-and-so? If you said, yes, I do, bang, before you know what's happened. Oh, you're a friend of his, are you? Well, maybe, and so on. And it's true, they did have their eyes narrowed. This was looking into the sun all the time, the Western squint, as it's called, but it's true. And so all these things are a completely new world. I didn't play an American, of course. I played an Englishman. Maybe not the fastest gun in the world, but certainly the fastest gunsmith. I made this gun in about 4 shots. Shots on the screen. Yeah. And that was a marvelous experience. I'm going to do another one, too. Another Western, I hope. It, for the moment, has been postponed, but I'm going to do it, playing an Englishman again in it. It's a story about the American Civil War. Now, I love to do that sort of thing. We all... I think everybody loves Westerns, and I'm certainly no exception. I love them. I think they're marvelous.
Well, I'm going to stop you there and open to our audience here, if we may, and invite questions from anyone who would like to put forward something on the basis of our discussion so far.
If I can answer them, I certainly will. Yes?
Is there any possibility, Mr. Lee, if you will get more Dennis Wheatley stories?
I hope so.
There is.
I was speaking to him about an hour and a quarter ago. And we both hope so, very much. Yes, I say there is certainly a possibility. I can't put it any more clearly than that. You see, there is a slight problem with Mr. Wheatley's stories. Problem, don't misunderstand me. What I mean is it's a good problem, but it's a difficult one today. You are familiar with the books. They are very big books, they're very long stories, and they have an enormous canvas, and they cover a tremendous amount of ground and territory. Now, it's simply and solely a matter of money today, that you simply cannot afford to make these pictures. There are some, on the other hand, that he has written. We did The Devil Rides Out, as you know, which I thought was a good film. And there were great problems in that picture, great difficulties, particularly the special effects, because the Angel of Death in the book is invisible, and you only see the horse with the pressure on the stirrups. You don't see anything at all, because if you see him, you're dead, This, of course, produced great difficulties, but I thought it was very well done, that picture.
How did
and he was very pleased with it.
How did you get round that problem on the Angel of Death? I seem to recall.
Well, they did have a man on a horse, and it did charge. Of course, it was special effects. It charged the pentagram in which we were in this big room in the house, which had been cleared of everything. And I suppose, I have made quite a study of the occult and this particular subject, which is an extremely interesting one, and of course goes through thousands of years of history, and is a desperately dangerous one, incidentally, for anybody who might be tempted, and very real, and by no means just a sort of bogey, things that go bump in the night kind of thing at all. black magic, for want of a better word. There are many words for it. Left-hand path, Satanism, whatever you like to call it, is a desperately dangerous thing. I don't propose to go into details. Some of the details are so nauseating that they would sicken you. But there are varying degrees, and just as there are the saints in Christianity and good people, so there are the saints, the black saints, if you like to call them that. Or they are called the blacks, the black magic. The left is against the right. Dennis Wheatley puts this terribly well in his books, I think, in his black magic books, Devil Rides Out, Strange Conflict, and To the Devil a Daughter, and The Satanist, and so on. And there are one or two books of his which can be condensed and made in a slightly smaller area, and I'm certainly hoping that we will make at least one.
Why do you avoid seeing your own films?
Do you avoid them?
Well, I'm not going to say that they frighten me to death, but why do I avoid them? I don't honestly like seeing myself on the screen. I don't enjoy it. I cannot divorce myself from the performer, from the actor. It's very difficult. It embarrasses me. This may sound very unconvincing, but it happens to be true. If it's something I feel I've really achieved something in, well, then one says, yes, that was all right, I did that well. But most of the time, and I think you'll find most actors feel like this, they think, oh my God, look at what I'm doing up there. Oh heavens, I shouldn't do that. Oh God, I shouldn't do this. And oh, that was terrible. And oh Lord, and you get progressively depressed. The point being, as a director said to me the other day, that actors should never be allowed to go and see rushes, for instance. You always look at the wrong things. You look at yourself. It's only human. And you look and you say, oh, that was awful, my mouth was hanging open, or, I was squinting or something, or I was doing this, or I was doing that. Now, you're looking at the wrong things. You shouldn't be looking at this. You should be looking at the whole thing. I go to a film, I see myself, and I sometimes get immeasurably depressed by what I see on the screen. I think, oh, that wasn't very good. The audience apparently likes it. And they are, after all, the people for whom I work. I work for you. I don't work for the critics. I don't work just for me. I work for you, who go and watch. And thank you. But I honestly don't enjoy looking at myself. It depresses me, and I feel that there are so many other things I could have done. Then, of course, it's too late. I don't think it's a question of modesty. It's just a question of, as I said, I'm a perfectionist, and one's never really satisfied. And if you think about this too much, then you get too involved. In the wrong way.
Question over there. Up.
Have you ever heard that Graham Stoker was supposed to have died in a lunatic asylum?
No, I've never heard that. No, I've never heard that. Never. I have a book about him. There was a book written by Harry Ludlam, which was called Dracula, the Life of Stoker, and that is not mentioned. I have no idea whether he did. I would say it was extremely unlikely. There are very, very few people who have written this type of story who have, if you like, become connected in a way with what they wrote. And Paul Lugosi, this was a terrible tragedy, of course. I don't think this is any secret. He didn't exactly associate himself with the character, and there have been many stories to the effect that he lived in a house, with rubber bats and black things floating around, and tombstones in the garden. Of course, it's absolute nonsense. It made a good copy, I suppose. But I happen to know his widow. I was working in Hong Kong once, one day's work. And I sat round a table with George Raft, Dan Duryea, and Brian Donlevy, and I could never remember my lines. I just kept looking at them, because this was the cinema I was looking at. And Mrs. Donlevy was Lugosi's widow. Mrs. Brian Donlevy was married to Bela Lugosi. So, of course, I asked her a great deal about him. And also, I know one or two people who knew him very well. He was a magnificent person. He was a wonderful man. But for various reasons, due to great illness and one or two other things, he became very sick. And not in the mind at all, only in the body. And he died, he was 73, I think, when he died. But all that's nonsense. He lived in a very nice house and a very nice flat, although I do believe it is true that he was buried in the Dracula Cape. I was told he was. I have no means of proving it or disproving it. I was told he did. I have the ring, or a copy of it, that he wore. And I wear it if I ever play the part. That's a tribute to him.
In Dracula Has Risen from His Grave, how did they actually cut they showed a bit of film just now of the fellow coming with a stake.
Yeah.
And actually bringing it down.
Oh, you're asking me to reveal all the secrets now. Well, it takes a lot of the mystery away if I answer that, but it is, of course, a trick. And what they do is they put an iron plate onto you, or onto me, don't worry. And there is a metal spike which comes up from this iron plate, sticks out like that, strapped round you, the plate strapped round you. And there is a long tube attached to this, which goes right down your leg and down there and round to the end where the special effects man is standing with the bulb and the blood in it and everything. And to squeeze it, and the water and the mixture, as before. And onto this stake is put a cut part of onto this spike is put a cut part of the stake. Do you see what I mean? Instead of having the point, they cut off the point. They drill a hole in the end, and it fits over the spike. You see? So you just grab it as if it hits you. And it's done by cutting, of course. He brings it down, and you do that. It looks as if it's gone into you. I'm ruining the whole thing now. And next time, though, it'll be real, I promise you. And he then, the special effects man, then, all the blood which comes out, and so on. There are many tricks. I mean, you read about them in the papers now. People are carrying things in their mouths and so on, and biting on them, the blood comes out and so on. And in the many films where you see people being shot and blood splashing out, of course, it's triggered off by electricity. I don't want to destroy the illusion, but I'm sure most of you know this anyway. But it is, of course, a trick.
Mr. Lee, are we ever likely to see you on the stage in the near future?
Now, I know what you mean. Well, I honestly don't know. I was on the stage many years ago. I really can't answer that. If something came along that...
Would you like to?
Yes, I would.
What sort of part would you want?
Well, again, I don't really know the answer to that. Obviously something I thought I could do when the people wanted me to do. See, I have a great drawback on the stage because I'm so tall. This really is a drawback. If you have an immensely tall person on the stage, it's quite a problem for the rest of the cast. I mean, they look smaller, if you see what I mean, and this sometimes it's not a very good thing. It kept me out of playing any decent roles the first 10 years of my career in films, because I don't have to tell you, those of you whose memories go back to the 40s and the 50s, particularly here, the majority of films that were made in this country were made, of course, domestic subjects and stories of our history and our times, and indeed of the war and things like that. And you see, I wasn't regarded as being a typical sort of Briton, because I don't look it, because I being partly Italian, I look foreign, if you like, to a certain extent. And so that rather kept me out of playing the typical British parts, which were the majority of films that were made. In addition to which, I was at least 2 inches taller than the very tallest British leading man. And in some cases, I was 10 or 11 inches taller than some of the others. And that just wasn't going to happen, They just said, no, not him.
What about your singing?
You want to hear it?
Give us a song.
I was trained as a singer to a certain extent many years ago in Scandinavia, and I did make some records, and I did sing in public, excerpts from operas. Once I was very fortunate, I sang with Jussi Björling. In fact, it was through him that I ever got the offer to be a singer. It was at a party one evening, and he, of course, was the great tenor of his age and day. And everybody started singing, as we might all do so in this room. And I was singing away, and he suddenly stopped and said to me, you have a voice. You should do something with it. And the next day, I went with him to certain authorities in Stockholm who were connected with the opera, and they said, well, look, why don't you come to us, and we'll use you and train you. It wasn't possible, because I would have had to pay for the lessons myself, and Stockholm, even then, was an immensely expensive town, and I simply couldn't afford it. That's the great, well, not tragedy, that's not really the word. That was my greatest sorrow. That is the thing I would rather have been than anything in the world, was an opera singer, although what I hear, what goes on, it's certainly not an easy world. I have signed a contract recently to make records. I'm going to, and I have indeed made 3, but I won't let them out because I don't like them. It's as simple as that. It's a very difficult thing. What do you sing? Obviously, I can't sing way out pop. I'm much too old, and I haven't got the style. Couldn't do it. Opera, you have to be an opera singer. So what's in between? Well, now we are getting back to the ballad type of song. We're getting back to the easy, melodious type of song, or so it would seem. I'm not an expert on this at all. I think this is the kind of thing that I'll be singing. But it must be, obviously, in the right area for my voice. I'm really a bass. For those of you who are musical, I can get up to F, which is fairly high for a bass, and I can get down to bottom C, which is horribly low. And I have a fairly big range, and I can sing five languages, 6 languages. I think I could sing in, almost any kind of sort of ballad type of song. I'm certainly going ahead with it like mad. I practice every day, and I keep my voice moving every day, and have done for about 15 years. But it's the one thing I'm really most sorry about, that I never did that. But I'm going to, I promise you. I warn you. Yes?
Being that you're interested in singing, why not a musical Dracula?
Do you know it's been done? It's been done. Yep.
Not by you, though.
Not by me. Nor has Dracula Dances hit the screen yet, as far as I know. But it has been done. It was done, I believe, in Dublin. A musical Dracula. Well, I was told it was, and as a matter of fact, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I once sang the Demon King in a pantomime, and I don't know, how would you do it? Would you do it like a sort of Mephistopheles?
If you were in it, it would go.
Thank you.
Another question in the middle there?
Yes.
It's not the end of it.
We're meant to frighten the audience.
The resurrection of Hammer films now seems to be a tongue-in-cheek thing for the audience to participate in, for them to enjoy themselves. The gore isn't realistic anymore. The whole
Don't you think so?
no, I think it's a step-up because where the success of the horror film hits, the Hammer films are.
Really? I've never heard that before. No, really, I haven't. I quite appreciate your opinion. I'm just saying I've never heard of... Well, look, I must explain that an actor's job is to act. You appreciate that, of course. In all the years I've worked with Hammer, and I've done, I think, 18 films for them, I've never at any time had any feeling or has there been any suggestion at any time to anybody connected with these films that it was in any way a send-up. They're certainly not intended to be. Or they're not intended to be tongue-in-cheek, I assure you. You mean you don't think the audience finds them frightening?
Well, they're more geared for violence generally, for bloodshed and film.
Yes, I think there is less violence in maybe all 18 Hammer pictures that I have done than in one Wild Bunch.
Yes.
You see, because the reason, if I may, you've started a train of thought here by which I happen to feel rather strongly. People are often asking me about this question of violence in my pictures. Well, I'm not defending it or justifying anything, certainly not myself. But what I am saying is that the violence in these films is completely harmless because it's completely unbelievable and pure fantasy. It's Grimm's fairy stories, which in some cases are much worse.
Don't you think that some, like the original Frankenstein, and perhaps even things like King Kong,
Oh, well, I don't think you can compare them. That's rather different. That's animation, you know.
were meant to be believable? The objects of
Well, I hope that what we do is believable. We certainly mean it to be. We who make the film, we who do the performing, intend it to be believable.
fantasy level. I mean, you don't believe that that man is actually a vampire with such blood that he's actually being stabbed. In the same way as when you see the Wild Bunch, you believe that that man is being shot.
Well, I can only say, obviously, it's a matter of personal opinion. But I would think that the reason for the success of these films is because people do believe, for that hour and a half, that it could happen, and they are affected by it, even in perhaps rather a cosy way. Oh, it can't happen, can it? You know, that kind of thing. It obviously is in the realm of fantasy. It's got to be in the realm of fantasy. And there is no harm in this. But I do think that if we set out to frighten people, I don't mean this in a damaging way. I mean, give them a good thrill, if you like, whichever way you like to look at it. I think that we do succeed to a certain extent. If a film looks as if it's been made tongue-in-cheek, then I think it's failed.
Well, we're going to cut in there because the time has caught up with us. Well, Christopher Lee, I'm very grateful to you. We're all very, very grateful to you for having come along this afternoon. Thank you very much for giving us so much of your time. It's been a really fascinating talk. Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure for me.